Hello everyone and welcome back. In this latest video series, we are going to focus on Tapestry. Tapestry is a Jamie Stegmaier game, obviously. It was released in 2019 and it was a little bit polarizing in the industry. Regardless of how you feel about it, we're going to demonstrate the solo game here and do a series of videos. So I think the first one I'm going to shoot is going to really focus on just a couple of the Automa actions. So for the most part, if you've read the rules or you're familiar, the Automa is pretty straightforward. However, there are just three areas that I think could use from a little bit of a video tutorial. There's a lot of resources online that cover the other areas, but I want to dive in depth and do some examples for their explore action, their conquer action, and then their income phase. So I think that's what I'm going to cover in the first video. And then in the second part here of this series, I think what I'm envisioning is I'm going to play sort of a campaign. I'm going to play 12 games. We're going to go through all 12 of the civilizations that are recommended for the solo play, and we're going to start off on level 2 difficulty. And if we win, we're going to go up a level, and the goal is going to be whether or not we can beat level 6 before we exhaust all of the civilizations. So that's the plan. I'm going to get the game set up here, and I will see you on the other side. Okay, so the first action we're going to dive into is the Automa's Explore action. So let's say, the game's obviously just started here. The favorite track for the Automa is Exploration, and now they are advancing on this track for their turn, and they need to explore. So you need to determine which valid hex they are actually going to explore into. If we look at the rules, they say that the valid hexes are all hexes that Automa can legally explore are valid. If there are none, skip this action. So the reason why the word legally there is present because they, according to the original rules, the base rules, you can only explore out of a territory that you control. So if they didn't control a region where there was then a hex that was unexplored, then there would be legally no hex that they could explore into. But in this case, there are 3 hexes. And now what I like to do, and I would encourage you to do, is to mark the valid hexes with a cube. And this will help you kind of narrow down the choices. So all 3 of those are valid in this scenario, and we need to break, we need to figure out which one they're going to do. So if we look back here at the tiebreakers, if the Automa doesn't have military as its favorite track, then only the valid hexes furthest from territories you control remain valid. And now, as we talked about at the beginning, they do not have military as their favorite track. They have exploration as their favorite track. So it's only going to be hexes that are furthest from ones that I control, that they're interested in. So now this is also a good time to talk through how the Automa calculates distance. If you look here in the rules, it basically says that they don't just look at, when they're counting hexes, the straightest path. They actually go around hexes that they control. So really it's important to know that it's the hex that is the fewest away, but via the shortest path of hexes with 0 Automa outposts and then 1 to 0 of our tokens. So they also go around any hexes that have 2 of our tokens on them. So basically, if we look back at this example, this hex is 1, 2, 3 away from me. This hex is 1, 2, 3, 4 away from me. And this hex here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it would be this hex that they actually explore from. And then when you're doing the action itself, you draw one of the tiles from the supply and you put it in here in any random orientation. And the reason why, two things to note on these, is the first is the Automa never gets the the icon that's listed on the tile, so they never get that benefit. And also, they never take points from placing a tile. So that's why the orientation doesn't matter at all. If we look back here at the rules, we've narrowed down and broken the tie. And now the action is to draw a territory tile and place it face up with a random orientation on the chosen hex. And that's what we did, so that's where they would explore to. One last comment on this is the specifically the word random here. And the reason that word is there is because down the road you might do an explore action, and so it's important that when you're turning over a tile for the Automa that you just randomly place it in the spot. You don't look and you don't try to line things up, because that would then influence potentially how you explore into and place a tile in the future. So you're supposed to just randomly orient it and put it in the spot that you want to put it in. Okay, so we've now set up our second example for the explore icon, and let's say that the Automa is looking to explore again on this turn. So to make it easy, we will mark the eligible hexes that they can explore into, which would be here, 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 and here. And what we find out is we're still looking to explore the hex that's furthest from us. So when we count them, which we'll go ahead and do right now, these two are obviously closer than these two. You have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and these are further. So we remove these options right away. Now what you find is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's actually a tie between the two remaining valid hexes. So the way you break ties is, if you look back at the rules, it says basically use the hex tiebreaker to pick one of the hexes among the valid ones. So what that's referring to is our AI card pairing, and specifically this box right here on this card. You ignore the outsides of the cards. So this is the one we're interested in, and we look at these two arrows. And the first larger black arrow is the primary row or column that you would traverse down to find a valid hex. And the second smaller one is the next row or column, along with the general direction you're going to keep going in until you find a valid one. So in this case, this is saying first we're going to break the tie by going down this column. Next, we're going to go down this column, this column, this column, until we break the tie. And if we do that, when we get to this column, yes, they both are in here, but you follow the arrow. And this would be the cube that we come across first. So this would be the one that they explore into. Now, if these were reversed, and this were our tiebreaker card, then basically you see that it's kind of in the top diagonal. So first you would look here, 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 and that's where you first would come across this cube. And so that would be the tile that you explore into instead. All right, and now the final example we're going to give is if the explore action once again comes up for the Automa, but this time the military track is their favored track. So here you have their token signifying that military is their favorite. So if you were to go ahead and do the explore action again, in the rules, the first tiebreaker says that if the Automa doesn't have the military as its favorite track, then only the valid hexes furthest from the territories I control remain valid. So basically, all this is saying is that we're not going to worry about that and being furthest anymore, and we're just going to use the hex tiebreaker card to determine where this goes. So essentially, all of these hexes, these and this one are valid in this example, are legal moves. So we're just going to look here at the card, and basically this is going to inform us that the first hex they're going to put into would be this one here. Because if we go down this first row, there's nothing. The second row, there's nothing. But then the third row, we run into this hex. It's a valid movement. It's a valid placement. So that's where they would end up putting their tile. Okay, so the next action we're going to deep dive into is going to be Conquer. Now, Conquer is a little bit more confusing than Explore. However, I've found a diagram, a flow chart on BGG that I like to reference, and it with examples, I think it's pretty straightforward overall. So the first thing we're going to do is a Conquer in this current example here. Whenever you run into a Conquer, I like to, once again, use this flow chart. So the very top decision tree is, can the Automa conquer a territory that I control? So if we look here, I control both of these. So the answer is obviously yes. The Automa can come in and either take this one or this one. So we're going to focus on the left path here. And the next decision is, can the Automa still gain the middle island achievement? So that means, has anyone entered the middle island, and is this achievement still up for grabs? Well, in this example, it certainly is still up for grabs. So then we go down this path, and we're only going to include the territories closest to the middle island. So that's our tiebreaker right there, because if we look at these, that means that the Automa has no interest in coming here. So they're going to come here because it's closest to the middle, and essentially they're going to come on in and topple ours. We do have the option, obviously, to play a trap card here, but if we didn't have a trap card, then that's how this first example would play out. Okay, so to give a second example here, a little bit different, but pretty much the same, except now we have a outpost in the middle island. So in actuality, nothing changes because the Automa can still conquer the middle island. Obviously, we took the first achievement here, but the second achievement is still available. So their interests remain the same. They want those 5 points. So when we go and work our way down this flow diagram, this is still a yes. So the Automa is going to go ahead and basically do the same play that they just did. All right, so that brings us to the last example in this left side of the flow chart, which is basically, is the middle achievement still available? Well, in this case, it's not. Obviously, the Automa and myself are both in the middle tile, so both achievements have been claimed. So in that case, if we look at the flow chart, we're going to say no here. And so now it's any valid territory that I control is valid for them. So both of these, they would be interested in conquering. And the final tiebreaker, which is usually the case, is the hex tiebreaker listed on the card. So in this case here, you would just look at the arrows once again and use them to learn that this is the hex they're interested in conquering. Okay, so we're doing the conquer action still, and we've worked our way through the left side of this flow diagram, which basically, again, the top level question is, can the Automa conquer a territory you control? So that's the first question you ever ask yourself, and if the answer is yes, you follow the left side here, or if you were just going along the rules, you would basically do this conquer opponent portion of the rules. Now let's look at an example of going down the right side. And the right side is definitely a little bit more confusing, but again, we're going to set up a lot of examples here and hopefully this will help you out. Okay, here is the board state for the next conquer example that we're going to cover. As you can see, the Automa is not adjacent to anywhere that they can come in and conquer a territory that we control. So once again, if we look at the top here, the answer is no, and we're going to head down the right side of this flow now. So the first question we come across is, does the tiebreaker card have the topple icon? So if we look at our AI card pairings, it's referring to this cell right here. And since there's no toppled icon in this box, the answer there is no. If these were reversed, if this were here, then the answer would be yes. And we're going to cover this example in a minute. But for now, this is our AI pair, and the answer is no. So we now move down into this circle, exclude hexes adjacent to your territories. Well, if we go ahead and mark valid territories again, we know that for the conquer neutral action, all hexes that can legally be conquered or explored by the Automa are valid. So all that means is that basically all of these are valid. So that's what we're looking at right now. If we go back to the flowchart, we're going to exclude hexes that are adjacent to my territories. Okay, well that's interesting. So that means we're going to get rid of the following options because they're adjacent to my territories. And the reason we're doing that is because the toppled icon wasn't on the card. If it were, we would keep them. Okay? So then, can the Automa conquer a hex? Well, yes, there are still plenty of valid hexes for the Automa to conquer. Can the Automa still gain the middle island achievement? Yes, they can. So in this example, we have conquered the middle island first. So we've received the 10-point example. Achievement. However, the 5-point achievement is still available. So the answer there is yes. In which case, we include only territories closest to the middle island. So that is going to basically mean it's this one right here, because if we count, it's 1, 2. 2 away from the middle island. This is the hex that the Automa is going to conquer. And when they conquer a blank territory like this, they basically just turn up a new one, place it randomly, and they put one of their outposts on it. All right, here is the next example that we're going to walk through. So once again, the Automa is going to attempt to do a conquer action. If we look at the flow diagram, can they conquer a territory you control? So no, they can't. They can't come into here because they don't control the middle territory. Does the tiebreaker card have the toppled icon? Once again, it does not. So we're going to exclude hexes adjacent to my territories. So let's go ahead and mark them off one more time. Okay, so here are the valid placements now. Actually, this one is not valid. Sorry about that. So we're excluding this one because this is one of my territories. So the next question is, can the Automa conquer a hex? Yes, there are plenty of blue cubes, so they can. Can they still gain the middle island achievement? So in this example, the answer is no. There's already 2 outposts there, so that achievement is now gone. Do you control any territories with a single token? The answer there is yes. I control both of these territories, and both have a single token on them. So in that case, the Automa is going to do this one, which is include only territories closest to those territories, which if we were to count would obviously just be this one is the only one that's eligible. It's 2 away from one of mine, so that's where they're going to go ahead and place a new tile with an outpost. All right. You've made it this far. So the final set of examples that we are going to talk about are basically when we reverse the AI pair and we now have a toppled icon here. 2 things change when that's the case. The first is the Automa will now consider these as valid hexes, anything adjacent to me. And then secondly is once they actually put down and they've decided which one they're going to place and they've put an outpost, they're also going to place a toppled shadow empire there. So those are the two major differences. Let's just go through the flow diagram and do a couple of examples real quick. Okay, so this is the board state for this next example. And if we again look at our pairing, we see that the toppled icon is in place. So now we're really going to just unleash the full potential of this entire flow chart. And we're going to get down into here and talk through a little bit of that. So once again, at the top, we're going to just mark off all of the valid conquer tiles. So those are, all of these are technically valid. All right, so as we work our way down, we start eliminating cubes. Does the tiebreaker card have the toppled icon? Yes, in this case, it does. So we are going to keep these cubes in place, whereas in previous examples, we would have removed them at this stage. Can the Automa conquer a hex? Yes, they can. Can the Automa still gain the middle island achievement? Yes, obviously there's no one there yet, so that achievement is available. So now we come into here. We're going to include only the territories closest to the middle island. So once again, when we're determining closest, we're going to count 1, 1, 1. So we're going to get rid of anything that's further from that. So all of these are going to go away. And now we've narrowed it down to only 3 valid spots. And now the way that this bottom works is that instead of going right to here, we also look to see if this one's applicable, which is, do you control any territories with a single token? So the answer there is yes. These two territories both have a single token. Include only territories closest to these. So what that is basically saying is that we're going to eliminate these. And this is the only territory that they're going to consider conquering, and since there's no more ties to break, that's where they're going to go ahead and go. And because of the toppled icon, once again, they're going to put a territory in with their outpost, but also a toppled shadow empire outpost. And now here is our final example. Once again, they're doing the conquer action. So we're going to mark off all of the eligible movements. Okay, all of those are eligible. So we'll start removing cubes now. Does the tiebreaker card have the toppled icon? Once again, in this example, it does. So we're going to include, we're not removing any yet. I mean, I guess let's just cover it. If it didn't, then we would start to remove ones that were adjacent to me, okay? But in this case, the answer is yes. Can the Automa conquer a hex? Yes. Can they still gain the middle achievement? So in this example, no, they can't. We have both gone ahead and taken those out, so the achievement's no longer available. So in that case, we go right here. Do you control any territories with single tokens? Yes, I control both of these. So we're going to only look at those then instead. So what that means is we're going to get rid of all of these. Okay? So now it's down to these 3, and the AI now needs to break a tie. And in order to do that, we're going to use the hex tiebreaker. So we just look back at the valid pair, at the AI pair, and we see that as we go with these arrows, this inevitably is the territory that they're going to go ahead and conquer. So they're going to flip up a tile, and once again, place one of their markers one of their outposts in a toppled shadow icon empire there. Okay, and now the last topic we're going to talk about in this video is the income turn, and specifically how the Automa goes ahead and conducts it. For this example, we're going to be using the level 4 income turn card, and the reason why is because it includes icons in every single option in every single box, whereas the default level 2, there's some blanks here. So just to give everybody a more complicated example, we're going to go ahead and use this level 4. Now the way you determine if the Automa is going to take income is you flip over their final pair. So when they're down to 2, you flip over their final pair, and if the card on the left has this hand symbol, that means they're going to go ahead and take the income round this turn. They're not going to do their normal actions. They're going to go ahead and do income. If it were reverse, or whatever the case may be, if there was no icon here, no hand icon here, then they're going to go ahead and do their normal turn. And then next turn, when they go to draw 2 new cards, since there aren't any, that's going to then trigger the income phase. Now, the way you conduct it is you go through each of these symbols, basically top down and then left right. So you first would do these 3, then these 3, then these 3. And of course, you still look at the number. So the number is indicative of which income round it is. So in the very first income round, all they're doing is they're grabbing a Tapestry card. So for this example, we're going to pretend that it's income round 2. So the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to reassess their favorite track. And so if you look at the player aid card, basically the only thing you're looking at is whether they're at the end of their favorite track or if they're less advanced than another marker. So in this case, white is tied with blue. The Shadow Empire is tied with the Automa. So they are not going to change their favorite track because specifically they're not less advanced than another marker. So they're happy here, and that's where they're going to leave it. Blue, on the other hand, over here, is less advanced than us. So all that means is now they are going to reassess their favorite track. However, they're not necessarily going to change it just because they're losing. And in fact, if we look at this example, this is the only other track that they're competing on at the moment. And while they're further along here, the player aid specifically says you're going to assess it from a perspective of whether or not, and if we flip this over, closest to the landmark, to a landmark, or the end. So in this case, they're actually further from this landmark. They're 1, 2, 3 away than they are here. 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, 1, 2. So in this case, their favorite track is going to remain this one because this is where they're closest to the next landmark. So they're both happy and they're not going to move their token. The next thing you would do, this icon, is you actually redo the last pair of actions. So whatever the last 2 cards were, the last 2 AI pairs, you'd go ahead and redo them. So blue would get a move on any track, and Shadow Empire would also get a move on any track. Next, you go ahead and you do their civilization special action. So that's the one that's over here referenced on the card. It's pretty straightforward. Now, one thing to mention here is that this card never changes. So even if during this phase a favored track for the Automa was to change, it doesn't matter. You're still going to keep their civilization power the same as it was during setup. So the next thing you do is you go ahead and you score. To score, you go ahead and look at each of these victory icons. So first, this one is to assess the number of landmarks they have and award points. Now, the points are multiplied depending on which era you're in. So in the first era, they're multiplied by 1, but in the second era, they get multiplied by 2, 2, and then 3. But in this case, this example, there are 2 landmarks here. And one item to note is that both the Automa and the Shadow Empire's landmarks go in this space. So now there are 2. You would multiply that by 1, so they would get 2 points. The next thing you do is you look at territories that they control, the Automa actually controls, which in this case is 3. So they would get 3 more points. Now in this first scoring round, this is 0, so they're not going to get any points here, but basically you would take their position, the Automa's position in the military track, which in this example is 2, and you would multiply it by the multiplier and give them that many points. Same with the science track, and then finally, same with the technology track and the exploration track. The one other points that they can score here is if you look here, it shows that they're going to get 2 points if they were the first one to get to this era. So if they did their income phase before us, they would get 2 points here. If they did this income phase before us, they'd get 3 and then 4. Next, you're going to draw 2 more cards, 2 more AI cards from the supply and put them into the AI discard pile. Now, in income rounds 3 and 4, you would do that again. However, in this example, again, we're just looking at income round 2, so you wouldn't do it here. Next thing you would do is draw a Tapestry card from the pile, from the supply, and cover up the phase that you just did. And that's just basically helping you remember that next time you're going to multiply by these instead. You're then going to draw another Tapestry card, and that's going to go in their hand, which is basically just used for traps. And then finally, you're going to take all of the AI discards and the last 2 that were just paired, and you're going to shuffle them up and create a new AI deck for the next round. And that concludes the tutorial video. Hopefully you found this helpful. And again, it either helped clarify a couple things, especially with the explore and conquer actions that you either didn't know or were having trouble figuring out, or it's helping you remember just how those actions work if you haven't played this game solo in a little while. So with that, we're going to start our campaign of playthroughs. And if you liked this video, please subscribe it and give it a thumbs up, and we will see you next time.